Good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck. It's Sunday afternoon, December 11th, and I'm shooting to you from my van. And it's a nice day, a little chilly out, so it's nice and warm in here. So that's why I'm here. It's quiet. It just makes a good spot to sit and try to do a video. And as you know, I don't edit, so I try to keep my thoughts in line so I don't get off on a tangent and I say what I want to say and I don't stumble over words, although I still do some of that. But it's been a while since I talked about a firefighter story. So this afternoon I thought I would talk about a firefighter story, and this one involved me. It was a medical thing and I was the patient. For many years, I had a condition called supraventricular tachycardia, or SVT. And what that is it's basically a short in the wiring in your heart. And when you have SVT, uh, for some unknown reason, it's not really triggered by anything. It's not triggered by exercise or anything, but all of a sudden your heart will start beating really, really fast, way over 200 beats a minute. And as the condition progresses, the episodes will get a little bit more frequent, and they won't convert. And the way that's handled is there's a drug called adenosine, and all the paramedic units carry it. And of course, they have it in the emergency room. And that was a bird flying over that shadow. It startled me there for a second. Anyway, so in order to convert back into normal sinus rhythm, you have to use the adenosine. And what adenosine basically does is it gets kind of a chemical control alt delete on your heart timing mechanism, and it stops your heart briefly, and then your heart starts beating again. I'd seen it used a number of times on our paramedic calls, and but it's a little different when they start using it on you. So I got the SVT problem, and it's not something that you're necessarily going to fall over dead from initially, but what ends up happening is if you go into SVT, your heart starts beating really, really fast. It's going to get tired after a while. And one of three things is going to have to happen. It's either going to convert back to normal sinus rhythm on its own, or there's going to have to be medical intervention in order to convert it. Or the other thing is eventually your heart will get tired, and if it gets tired enough, it'll stop. And of course, that's not a good thing because you're going to fall over dead at that point. But it's not an immediate thing. And so I got to the point where if I'd go into SVT, I'd just drive myself to the ER. And that I did that over the course of a few years. I did that several times. And they'd bring me right in. They knew what was going on, and they knew me. And they'd bring me right in, and they'd give me adenosine. And then they'd all stand there with their eyes wide open, waiting for my heart to start beating again. That was kind of an interesting experience. But I finally went in and I had a surgical procedure, which is called a cardiac ablation. And what they do is they go in through your femoral artery down in your groin, and they go up into your heart, and they know exactly where this spot is that's causing this problem. And they basically zap it with electricity. They refer to it as nuking it, but basically they hit it with high enough electricity that they damage the problem. And they're pretty good at that. They know what they're doing. And I had an ablation, and I didn't have any more problem for about 3 years. Well, then one day, lo and behold, and this is back when I still was with the Jeep Club, and I was actually leading a trip into a pretty remote area between here, the town I live in, and the Metro Phoenix area, back in the backside of the desert, and we were like 20 miles off the highway. And all of a sudden, I went into SVT again. Now, what was interesting is we had about, if I remember correctly, 15 or so Jeeps along with us. And among those people was actually my family doctor and one of the paramedics that worked for me. So we had a doctor and a paramedic both there. What we didn't have, of course, was the paramedic equipment and the drug box. So there's certain things you can try to convert this. And we tried all that and couldn't get me to go out of SVT. And my heart was beating like 200 beats a minute. And you can feel that when that happens, especially with a little bit of medical training, you know what's going on. So where we were at, we couldn't, we didn't have any cell service, so we had to drive a little bit further. We finally got out into the open desert and decided that I needed to be transported to the hospital. Well, there's no way in the world that we're going to get an ambulance back where we're at, and if we could, it was going to take it 2 hours to get there. So the only alternative was to call a helicopter. Well, I was in the business for a long time, and when I first started, we didn't even have medical helicopters. The first helicopter evacuation I was involved in actually used an Air Force helicopter, and we had to get some general's approval for that. And it took forever, and we ended up hanging on the side of a mountain overnight with some poor guy that was involved in a bulldozer accident and was pretty seriously injured. And but nowadays they've got there's quite a few helicopters. We actually have two based in our town. We have one medical helicopter based over at the hospital, and then we have another one based at the airport. But basically what happened is we got down to the open area where I had cell signal and I had a place where a helicopter could land. And, being a fire chief, I'd called the helicopters a lot of times. And so I called for the Arizona Department of Public Safety Air Rescue and gave them my GPS coordinates where we're at, told them we had a cardiac patient in SVT that we couldn't convert. And what I didn't tell them is I didn't tell them that I was the patient. And so they agreed to take the flight. And sure enough, they were there in 15, 20 minutes. I mean, we saw them coming. They flew in a direct line like a bee right to the GPS coordinates we gave them, circled us once and came in and landed right next to us. So anyway, they put me in the helicopter, started an IV on me, and I was still in SVT. And the paramedic literally had drawn up the medication into a syringe and literally was getting ready to inject it. And I converted back. And everybody looked at each other and was amazed. Nobody had ever seen that happen before. I'd been in SVT at that point for about 2.5 hours, which is a long time. And my chest was starting to feel heavy. And so they decided they needed to transport me. And so we did. They flew me to the cardiac unit at one of the Metropolitan Phoenix hospitals where I'd been before, where I had my ablation at. And what was interesting is they actually allowed me to sit up. They didn't make me lay down, so I actually got to enjoy the helicopter flight. That was the last time I've been in a helicopter, and this was, good golly, this is probably 10 years ago now. So anyway, that's the story about me having to call my own helicopter and getting flown to the hospital. They kept me overnight there, by the way, and they did a treadmill on me the next morning. I passed it all with flying colors. They let me go. Released me. My wife came down, picked me up. I ended up having to have a second ablation a few months later. And apparently the nerve path had reconstituted itself from the initial one. And so they had to go back and redo it again. And that time they said I haven't had a problem since then. So they told me I wouldn't have another problem, and I haven't. Kind of an interesting little medical sidebar. I don't think there's very many people that with my level of experience or whatever that can say that they actually at some point in time had to call a helicopter for themselves. But that's my story for today. I'll let everybody go. Have a good day. I'm not quite sure when I'll upload this. This is either going to be my 50th video or maybe my 51st. I think the one I just did about my camera equipment will be my 50th. And so the channel's going well. Thank you all for subscribing. If this is your first time here, please feel free to subscribe, comment. Check my community page. I try to post something there every day. And with that, I'll let you all go. As I always tell you, love each other, take care of each other. It's a great life. And we'll talk to you on the next one. Peace out.